All right, I'm going to get started. It is noon and we'll just begin. This is being recorded and I am working to get this translated at least into Spanish and Hmong, though it may not be translated timely for this upcoming deadline. I want to welcome you all to the AGRI Value-Added Ag Grant Seminar, webinar, I guess we'll call it. This is sponsored by a team of groups that have been doing a fair number of webinars on COVID-related programs, and we will also be doing more webinars on proposed grants. It's sponsored by Minnesota Farmers Market Association, MISA, which is the Minnesota Institute for Sustainable Agriculture, North Central SARE, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Center, Minnesota Farmers Union, and Sustainable Farming Association. I'm Teresa Caveney, the Executive Director of SFA, and I'll be moderating. Jane Jewett with MISA, who isn't quite on the call but will be jumping on, will field questions. And if you could use either the Q&A or the chat box and type your questions in as we go along, Jane will be watching that, and I'll check it as well as I can, just to make sure we've answered your questions. I think with that, we'll get started, and I just want to make sure we extend thank yous to the presenters. Jordan Buckles is going to be walking through the bulk of the AGRI Value-Added Ag Grant Program. She works for the Minnesota Department of Ag as a program officer, and Ann Kush is MDA Senior Grant Specialist, and Ann used to manage this program. Jason Robinson with AGRI is going to share with us some do's and don'ts in writing a grant. And then we have two grant recipients, Deanne Luffin from Cannonbell's Cheese and Dan Zimmerly with Cedar Crate Farms, who will share their experience and offer particular advice and guidance. With that, I think, just to clarify what we'll learn, we're going to learn about AGRI, and in particular how to apply, the application requirements, timeframes, what makes for a good grant. We will hear about good grants, both content for good grants and pitfalls to avoid. As I mentioned, we'll get examples of previous AGRI grants that have been made. And then throughout the program, you're going to hear a few other ag-related grant resources, as well as information on one coming up here on Wednesday regarding the Farmer Rancher and Partnership Grant. So I'm going to turn this over to Jordan.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for your interest in this grant. So, like Teresa said, I work for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. I am a grant specialist, and I administer the value-added grant. So the AGRI program stands for Agricultural Growth Research Innovation. It was established in 2009 to promote the advancement of the state's agricultural and renewable energy industries and to fulfill the state's commitment to the ethanol industry. Funds for the value-added grant specifically were made available in 2013. And that link you see at the bottom of the screen is the link to our website for the value-added program. So the value-added grant is a competitive process, and it offers funding for value-added businesses, including bioenergy producers, to invest in equipment. Kind of the broad timeline of this grant is applicants will apply for the grant, and then a panel of reviewers will evaluate these applications using a scoring rubric. And then reviewers will meet and develop recommendations for funding, and ultimately the Commissioner of Agriculture makes the final funding decisions. Once those decisions are made, grantees will sign contracts and then work and complete their projects and be reimbursed for 25% of the costs of their projects. And just a disclosure, grants are taxable income, so grantees will receive and have to fill out an IRS Form 1099. So if you are awarded a grant, MDA will write up the contract detailing your project based on the information you provided in your application. So these projects must be completed within 3 years of the contract start date. So while you're completing your project and purchasing your equipment, it's important that you collect invoices from your suppliers and keep track of the proof of payment. That can be in the form of a bank statement, a cleared check, loan disbursements, etc. So it's important that you keep track of the invoices and proof of payment, because when you're ready for your reimbursement, you will need to submit those proof of payment and invoices to us, and we will grant you a reimbursement. And sometimes we will come to your site and do a site visit just to kind of track your project and document the purchases that you have made. So the intent of the program is to increase the sales and use of Minnesota agricultural products by investing in the production capacity, market diversification, and market access for value-added products. So for the purposes of this grant, value added is defined as the addition of value to an agricultural product through processing. So costs that would be eligible under this grant include equipment and the respective shipping and installation costs of that equipment. Also eligible under this grant is costs related to physical improvements and business scale-ups. So in the past, we have done 2 rounds of applications each year, one in the fall and one in the spring. But for fiscal year 2021, we are just doing 1 round of applications. So this 1 application round open now will be the only one for this year, and we are expecting to award a total of $1 million. So that means for an individual, your maximum award can be $150,000 and a minimum award of $1,000. So on our website, we do have a lot of information detailing what projects are eligible and what projects are not eligible. So I thought I would just kind of cover a couple of the examples of eligible and ineligible expenses. But this is not fully encompassing everything that would and would not be covered. So please do visit our website to hear more, but I'll just kind of go through a couple examples of what is covered. So a couple costs that would be covered under this grant would be equipment that's used in the production of value-added products like processing, packaging, slaughter, things like that. Also, the related plumbing, wiring, and installation costs for that equipment would be covered under this grant. Things like cooler walls and refrigeration units would be covered, as well as equipment that improves process efficiency at biofuels plants and renewable energy production equipment. So examples of costs that would not be covered under this grant would be building installation, since we don't really have a way of knowing that this building would be used for value-added projects in perpetuity. We cannot fund it. Also, any expenditures incurred prior to the start of the contract are not eligible for reimbursement. So it's really important that only the costs that are after the start of the contract are included. Additionally, equipment that's used for harvesting or livestock production is not eligible for this grant, as well as beginning inventory and startup costs, and employee wages and benefits are not covered under this grant. So when reviewers are reviewing these applications, they first look for eligibility. So in order for a project to be eligible, it must be an investment in equipment that will produce production capacity, market diversification, and market access for value-added products. And after a reviewer has determined this project is eligible, bonus points are awarded if the project falls in the 4 priority areas that we have established for 2021. So these priority areas include projects that create additional meat and poultry processing capacity, as well as projects that increase food safety to improve marketability, and projects that respond to the changing market conditions as a result of COVID. So for example, projects that would increase capacity for household size packaging rather than wholesale packaging. And the final priority area for 2021 is projects that respond to the civil unrest, primarily in the Twin Cities. So examples of this would be rebuilding facilities that were damaged or destroyed, or increasing processing capacity in affected areas. So we do list on our website all of the past grantees. So I just pulled a couple examples of these grantees to kind of walk through what some successful projects do fund. So Auntie Anne's Fields received funding for a walk-in cooler and egg washer. Baker's Field Flour and Bread received funding for donut making equipment and a freezer. Brand Farms received funding for apple washing equipment. Double Take Salsa received funding for kitchen equipment and facility improvements. So you can kind of see how these are intended to increase the use and sales of Minnesota agricultural projects. So Doubting Thomas Farms, they got funding for grain cleaning equipment and storage facilities. Fresha got funding for facility and equipment to store, sort, wash, and package fresh carrots for the wholesale market. There was also funds for storage and processing facilities and winemaking equipment for a vineyard and coolers for storing berries after harvest. So those are just a couple of the examples. But we do have all of our past grantees on the website. So if you're hearing this and you think that you do have a project that would be eligible, the first step is for you to submit an application, and we submit our applications online. So this is a screenshot from our website, and I have an arrow pointing to where the link for our application is. So we need to receive your application by 4 p.m. on October 29th, and we can expect that our decisions will be made by mid-December. So also on this website, in the forms and resources box near the yellow arrow, there is a link to the request for proposals, or RFP. And it's really important that you review that document because it lists all the details of the grant and the requirements for your application, and just many resources that will help you have a successful application and fill out the required parts of your application. So some tips for filling out your application is, like I mentioned, visit our website because we have a lot of different resources on there for you to review. We have a page where we list all of our past projects, like I've already mentioned, and there's a screenshot here to show you where that is on our website. If you see a project that you think is similar to a project you want to propose, you can contact personally that grantee, and it's possible they might reach out to you and tell you kind of about their experience and maybe give you some tips. So that is one option for a resource to help you when you're writing your application. And like I've mentioned a couple times, it's really important that you read the RFP because that's where all of the information for your application is located, and it will tell you exactly how points are awarded for your application, and it will help you understand if your project is eligible. And so another big tip I like to tell potential applicants is that it's really important that you have good cost estimates in your application. We really want to see that you have a plan and that you've been preparing for this project and you have a really good understanding of what costs are going to be incurred by this project and what costs you are requesting from us for funding. Yeah, so just a couple more tips on filling out your application. You really should highlight why the Minnesota Department of Agriculture should fund this project and how your project meets the goals and priorities that are listed in the RFP. Just a reminder that the primary focus of this grant is to increase the use and sales of Minnesota agricultural products. So you really want to make the pitch that by us funding your project, we will see an increase in the sales of Minnesota agricultural products. Another important tip is to be clear in your application about where your matching funds are coming from. We only reimburse 25% of the costs for your project, so we want to be able to see that you will be able to fund and complete this project, even if you have to pay for 75% of the costs. And I've mentioned this a couple times already, but it is really important in the RFP on page 11, there's the exact rubric that will be used by our reviewers. So before you submit your application, you really want to look at this rubric and kind of just score your own application and see whether you have checked all the boxes for eligibility. And one more tip is to have someone else review your application. I know when you've been looking at it for a while, it can kind of all start to make sense to you, but with a fresh set of eyes, they might notice where you're lacking detail or if something doesn't make sense. So it's always good to have someone else review the application as well. Another tip is to spend a significant portion of your time on the budget table. Reviewers really want to see that you've put a lot of thought into the costs of this project and that you've researched where you might be getting your estimates from and what costs will be incurred. So the budget table is really important to put a lot of work into, and then the budget narrative should detail and kind of explain the budget table that you fill out. So if you're hearing this and you don't think your project would be eligible for the value added grant, I thought it might be helpful to just very briefly touch on a couple other grants and programs that we have at MDA. And full disclosure, I do not administer these grants, so I'm not as well versed in these grants, but I think it will be helpful to just kind of give an overview of each of these programs. So the goal of the Livestock Investment Grant is to improve, update, and modernize livestock operations through equipment purchases, physical improvements, and acquisition of facilities. And this grant is a 10% reimbursement up to $25,000 and a minimum of $400. So this grant does have a lifetime maximum of $50,000, meaning you can apply more than once, but you will only receive one grant per project. So examples of projects that are funded under this grant can include generation transition, buildings and infrastructure, different technologies, and on-farm processing. So there's a lot of different opportunities for all stages of farming and all stages of livestock production under this grant. So this grant is open right now, but it has a due date of 4 p.m. on November 4th of this year. And just a little note that any expenses that are incurred outside of January 1st, 2021 and December 31st of 2022 are not eligible for reimbursement under this grant. So the next grant I will talk about is the Sustainable Agriculture Demonstration Grants. And these grants are intended to explore innovative on-farm research and demonstrations relating to farm profitability, energy efficiency, and environmental benefits of sustainable agriculture practices or systems. So some examples for this grant would include research that is looking at the practices that improve soil health or conservation tillage and weed management methods, or novel cover crops and crop rotation, or developing, refining, and improving marketing opportunities, including season extension and post-harvest storage and handling. And so with these projects, they are all published annually in the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's Green Book. So that is something to keep in mind with this grant, that all outcomes of your research will be published on our website in what we call the Green Book.
Also, just want you to know that we will be doing a more in-depth webinar that includes discussion of this particular grant on Wednesday, the 7th of October, and we'll touch on the specifics of that towards the end.
Great. Yes, so there's $200,000 available for this grant, and applicants can request up to $50,000 for the grant. And the projects last 2 to 3 years, and like I mentioned previously, the grantees must be willing to share their outcomes with others because we do publish those results. And so the application period is open for this grant as well and due by 4 p.m. on Thursday, December 10th. So the next program I will touch on quickly is the Good Food Access Program. And this is intended to increase the availability of and access to affordable, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food for underserved communities in low and moderate income areas. So these grants help grocery stores and small food retailers make physical improvements and purchase equipment to stimulate the sales of such foods. This grant has a total of $280,000 available, and applicants can request between $2,500 and $50,000. And like the other ones, this application period is also open and due by 4 p.m. on Thursday, November 19th. The final program I'll touch on briefly is our cost share programs. And so these programs are eligible for Minnesota farms or for Minnesota registered food companies with less than 500 employees. And this cost share program is intended to help cover the costs of marketing agricultural products. So examples of eligible costs would be e-commerce and merchandising costs, e-commerce platform fees and setup, excuse me, website setup and store fees and other utilities, as well as consultants and contracted e-commerce management, photography and videography for marketing, as well as point of sale work and business-to-business trade shows, including virtual events and store demonstrations. So this program reimburses up to $4,000 for each program, the e-commerce and the wholesale program. But there is a $2,000 limit for products that are made outside of Minnesota, even if the business itself is in Minnesota. We really want to incentivize the use of Minnesota products. So this application is also open, but it's a first come, first served basis. So It's important that you apply for reimbursement whenever you have eligible costs that were incurred between July 1st and December 31st. And so Ariel and Brian are the 2 points of contact for this grant. But if you visit our website, we have the points of contact for each grant listed there. So do reach out to the respective contact for whichever grant you are interested in. So I thought I would just reiterate again a couple resources that might help you with your grant writing. The RFP, the request for proposals on our website, is going to be your best friend in your application process because it has all of the details needed for your application. So please do review that extensively before you submit your application to make sure that you have everything needed for your application. Additionally, we have a Q&A page on our website where we post questions that we have received in the past regarding this grant. And so if you have questions, I advise you to first check out that Q&A page because it's very likely that your question's already been asked and you have just a really quick response and you can get your question answered. But if you do have a question that has not been asked, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I have my contact information on the next slide. So you can reach out to me with specific questions and I will get that posted to the Q&A page. Another good resource on our website is to look at past projects, like I mentioned earlier, and reach out to those grantees and see if they'd be willing to help you. But there's also the option to reach out to organizations in your community because often they will help with grant writing. And so just researching what organizations are available in your area would be really helpful because most regions have small business development centers or local economic development associations or regional initiative foundations that are willing to help with grant writing. And another resource that is willing to help out with grant writing sometimes is called SCORE. That's a nonprofit that stands for Service Corps of Retired Executives. So those are just a couple options that you might have available to you for grant writing. So thank you so much for your interest in this program. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, and I believe we will be answering questions once all the presenters have completed today.
Yes, and I do see we have a question in the chat. I just encourage you to type your question in either the chat or the question and answer. I appreciate your presentation, Jordan. Next up, we have Jason Robinson, and Jason is a grant reviewer. He is with AGRI, and he does he's the business development director for food. I am going to go ahead and call up your slides there. Great. Go ahead, Jason.
Thanks, Teresa. Hi, everyone. Like Teresa mentioned, I'm Jason Robinson with the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, or AURI. We're a 30-year-old nonprofit corp with a mission of fostering long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agriculture. And one thing I'd like to highlight in terms of Jordan's last slide is that we also work with the MDA to ensure that the MDA receives good grant applications. So we're also a resource that you can reach out to in order to not necessarily write grants, but to at least review and to provide some feedback. And that's, in many events, that's what I am here to talk about today for just a couple of minutes. But I also wanted to highlight one more piece. We're very active in the local food innovation ecosystem that really, when I say local, extends throughout the state and even beyond. But Jordan had also mentioned the e-commerce cost sharing program through the marketing program at the MDA. And I wanted to highlight that if you're interested, there was about a 2-hour webinar sponsored by Grow North, the MDA, and AURI about a month ago that highlighted many resources and really acted as a primer or a 101 level course in e-commerce that I would suggest you check out. It's available for free at the Grow North Minnesota website. So with that, I wanted to just highlight a few what I'll call best practices. So if you really want to make your reviewers smile, Jordan hit on some of these. I'm going to hit on them again because of how important they are. But first and foremost, just show me you read the RFP. I want to see as a reviewer that you're following the rules and that you're answering all the questions. So show me you read it, by doing that. There were at least 1 or 2 applications that didn't even make it past the first sentence because it was clear that the application didn't follow the rules and that the project wasn't eligible. So be very clear about what's eligible and whether or not your project falls under those eligibility rules, and that you answer the questions. These next 3 are really about how to most effectively write an application. So firstly, be concise. Use as few words as possible. And remember, because this is a competitive grant program, reviewers will typically have 30 to 40 applications to read. So they will definitely appreciate being as concise as possible in terms of what you're trying to communicate. Along with that is being clear. So be clear, don't beat around the bush. Make the ask for what you need obvious in terms of how the funds will impact what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And as Jordan mentioned earlier, there are 4 priority areas. So if your project falls into one of those 4 priority areas, whether it's COVID related, whether it's food safety related, or the others, clearly identify that purpose in your application. Don't make us try to search it out and try to interpret that it's a part of the application. And be focused. Keep the application centered on the ask and try not to provide extraneous information. Your reason for the application can get lost if you're going to write out a 500 to 700 word background on the business within the state of Minnesota. It's a great story, but it tends to gloss over the purpose of the application itself. So stay focused. Jordan also mentioned quantify the project impact. Demonstrate how this specific grant application and the award that you're asking for will increase utilization of Minnesota agricultural products over multiple years. How will jobs be impacted? And be specific. Because this is competitive, we want to make sure that those funds are going to the highest possible impact projects. And then finally, from a best practices point of view, show me you understand your market. Show me that you understand the future outlook of your market. How competitive is it? And ultimately, how will this project help you be more competitive? You might be meeting a need within the community, but how will this project help you be competitive within that market? And show me you have clear support from a customer base. Multiple projects that I've seen in the past, some of them were around creating capacity for small meat processing facilities. And what was very effective were letters of support written to from potential customers that showcase the need for the facility and the capacity, and that they would use it. So they had a built-in customer base before the project even got going. So that was very effective in terms of some of the best practices that I could recommend. Now, in terms of pitfalls, what I would say is make sure that that award request is commensurate with the impact that you expect to make. So ultimately, don't go after the largest award if the impact is small. In other words, the MDA reserves the right to adjust the amount of the award for a number of reasons. So if you're asking for the maximum award of $150,000 and the impact to Minnesota Ag is relatively small, it's likely that the size of that award could be reduced if it was awarded. So I would ask you, wouldn't you rather be in charge of asking for how much you really need? Maybe you could consider breaking up your project into multiple phases and spread out your need across multiple grant periods. Defining a clear plan, as Jordan's already mentioned, and as I will continue to highlight, if it wasn't already obvious, leaves a really good impression with the reviewer. So make sure that the award is commensurate with the impact that you're intending to make. Another pitfall is to clearly show me your plan. Lay out your financing and your funding sources. Include a letter of guarantee from your lending or financial institution. This is part and parcel with what Jordan's mentioned in terms of highlighting where you're going to be getting those matching funds. And if you could get a letter of guarantee from your bank or indicate that you are going to get those funds from a personal checking account or banking service, it's pretty critical to be able to highlight that and to show us that you're going to be able to afford this and that you have the financial wherewithal to manage the project effectively. Because if the grant funds are awarded, we want to make sure it's going to be a successful project. Another pitfall that I've seen is just having too many unknowns. Reviewers really want to see that you've done your homework to make sure that this project is going to be successful. For instance, address any potential regulatory or licensing restrictions, or highlight that you don't have any. Make sure that we know that you know that you've done your homework. So we don't want to see any unknowns in that application. And if there is an unknown, be very upfront and clear about it and how that unknown will be addressed. Remember that it takes a village. Prove, like Jordan's already mentioned, prove to us as a reviewer that you've leveraged your local network. Whether that's an economic development organization, one of the initiative foundations, one of the small business development centers, to really ensure that you have a successful project. It's amazing what you can really find, whether it's differential thinking about the project or possibly even other sources of funding that can help you with your match, if you look around what is close to you. And remember, the economic development organizations have a vested interest in seeing you succeed, since their goal is really to grow the local economy. So they want you to succeed. So take advantage of that and use those extra resources that are here to make you successful. Don't make me guess. When does the project begin? When does it end? This all goes back to having a very clearly laid out project plan. I want to see that you have progress milestones, that there's a clear beginning, a clear ending, and that you have thought through what are the steps associated with the project and when you expect those steps to happen. You know, some of the best projects that I've seen are those with a plan that's been laid out almost by an engineering firm for some really big projects. I'm not saying you need to go that far, but we do want to see that you know when the project is going to begin and the steps in that plan to get you to the end point and have a clearly laid out end point. And then finally, show me that you're serious. And what I mean by that is use a proofreader. Don't let simple things like easily correctable spelling or grammar mistakes torpedo your application. Those are indicators that you just didn't put the time and effort into the application that you should have, and can be easily corrected by having somebody else look it over. Jordan's already mentioned that. So I just want to make sure that I highlight that again, because that can torpedo your application, especially given that it's a competitive grant process. And I think Teresa or Jordan can probably highlight how competitive it is, but I do recall that roughly 30 to 40% of projects get funded, if it's even that high anymore. And to that point, you need to make sure that your application sticks out, whether it's for impact or whether it's for a clearly delineated project plan, or you've clearly identified that your project hits on those priority areas. Don't make it stand out because it's poorly written, because then it'll go into the no pile.
Jordan, can you share how many projects are funded versus how many applicants you receive?
I do not know that number off the top of my head. Maybe Anne has a better idea from the years past that she has administered this program. Otherwise, I can get back to you guys with that number.
Yeah, I used to have that number on the Q&A, and I am remembering in 15, 16, and 17 it was between 30 and 40% of the applications were awarded, but I don't know in the last few years. I think we'll have to look that up.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. And my last point is just remember that AURI does work with the MDA to improve the quality of applications. So you can feel free to reach out to me, and I might be able to provide some help, or at least look it over, or one of the other folks on our team might be able to provide some help. So Teresa, with that, I think those were my only 2 slides. So I am happy to turn it back to you.
Great, I appreciate that. So just to clarify, the people who might want to be submitting an application could contact you to get some help,
Correct.
feedback, and possibly to proof applications.
Absolutely. If that was what was needed, we could provide some support there.
Very good. Okay, next up we have Deanne, excuse me, I apologize for that, Deanne Lufkin, who is with Cannonbell's Cheeses. She is one of the successful RE applicants, and she's going to talk to you about her experience, how she went about applying, and what she is funded for. Take it away, Deanne, excuse me.
That's okay. As she said, I'm Deanne Lufkin out of Cannon Falls. I'm going to give you a brief overview of who before I talk about our actual grant. We are a small cheese company that started out as a hobby. 9 years ago, we started making cheese in the kitchen. We then, about 5 years ago, created an LLC to become a legal company, and then started making cheese commercially 4 years ago at the University of Minnesota, because you cannot make dairy products out of your home. It has to be in a licensed facility. Different courses to make sure I had the knowledge to be a cheesemaker. Check the cheesemaker short course at the University of Wisconsin in River Falls, and other different classes. We have become group members. We're involved in the Cannon Valley Grown group, which is a group of local SFA people. And we are part of a peer group of food producers through the Southern Minnesota. Yes?
It's a little hard to hear you. I wonder if it would work if you disabled the video.
Yep, my video.
Yeah, sometimes
Okay.
it helps.
There. That might be better. Yeah, I'm up. Yeah, up at the cabin right now. So we are part of, we're also part of our local food peer group. Today, we are breaking ground on our own cheese plant in Cannon Falls. It's not on a farm. It's going to be in the industrial park of Cannon Falls. We're going to be getting our milk from Square Deal Dairy in Randall, so just down the street from our cheese plant. But the equipment inside will almost have to be completely brand new, because it's hard to find used cheese equipment. The equipment will cost us over $440,000 alone. We are getting the building built for us by a separate investor who will then rent it back to us. So we are only on the hook for the equipment, which is pretty pricey, and we are not independently wealthy women. So we needed to apply for this value-added grant. We did a cheesemaker short course. I heard about a consultant named Jim Gage, who I was told was a grant whisperer, really good at writing value-added grants. Well, we worked with him for a few years on helping us with our business plan and getting things in line for our business. We also met with, and he was amazing. We talked with various business owners in Cannon Falls about what they've done, and also other food producers in our peer group. We talked with previous grant reviewers. Our mentor that we had through Smith had been a grant reviewer, and so had our city administrator. So we were able to talk to them about things that people looked for and actually get some help with our application from them. And we talked with previous recipients in our field, other cheesemakers who had gotten it, and other food producers in our peer group had gotten it. And I downloaded a bunch of winning applications in like fields, or some that weren't. And I didn't steal from them, but I took a lot of hints from them. So we didn't have the money to have our consultant actually write the grant for us, because as I said, we're not independently wealthy. So so I wrote it for us. The thing I would suggest is make sure you type it up all in Word. Don't do it straight onto the website itself, because if the website crashes or your internet goes down, you'll lose everything. And plus there's a limited word count. And so if you do it in Word, you can check your word count and make sure you're following the rules, as Jason said. You can also edit the document and have it reviewed by others easier if you type it in Word first. And then you just cut and paste your sections in where they go on the website. So what we got covered for our grant, we could only get the equipment purchased that would be purchased after we were selected for the grant. We applied for this grant a year and a half ago because we thought we would be building last year, but now we're building this year. We needed to put down payments on equipment, so we couldn't guarantee that those down payments wouldn't need to be paid before we found out about the grant. So large pieces of equipment weren't included in it. So we had to be very aware of what we were putting in that grant and what we weren't, because if you pay for it ahead of time before you find out about that grant, it doesn't count. So we were very aware of that. The things we concentrated on when we did this application were the buzzwords, like Jason said, the 4 important areas. I'm previous military, so buzzwords are very critical to us. So making sure that we're talking about the things that really matter to them so that we can stand out. Food safety was a critical part of it. We're getting some software that will ensure that we are recording things as needed and ensuring the highest quality of food safety standards. So that's getting covered, and the quality of our equipment helped us with food safety, and different other food safety items that we're getting, we highlighted through that. We also made sure we highlighted Minnesota grown ingredients and products and how we would use those, and how about 99% of what we use is going to be coming from Minnesota producers, and how our product alone would help Minnesota dairy. That we are going to be using Square Deal Dairy's milk, and how we're going to improve that milk and highlight that farm and help Minnesota through that. We also were able to show how the plant itself would increase our sales 6 times what it is now, with a lot of numbers and tables, which were inside of our business plan. So we talked about it briefly in our application, but a lot of that was in our business plan. We also got letters of support. Not all of them were required, but we made sure that we had them because it showed that other people believed in us and we'd done our homework and weren't just 3 bored housewives that thought this was fun. We also we've spent many years on our business plan. It is a living document, as we kept being told. We used LivePlan, which is a website, to house it and edit it. Our business plan is over 50 pages, which is kind of big, but it's broken out in separate sections, and it just shows that we've done our homework. And it's a lot of the things in that business plan, for the application, we were able to just say see business plan instead of retyping it. And like I said, we wrote this plan, we wrote the application on our own because it was too expensive, but we did have others that we respected review it for us and make sure that we were covering the important points. And so luckily we got the grant, which will be key to us being able to build our plant in the safest way and actually enhance Minnesota dairy. So if I can do this, you can do this. And it's long and scary, but it's very doable. So take your time and do it right, and good luck.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Again, a reminder to put your questions in the chat box or Q&A. And next up, we have Dan Zimmerly with Cedar Crate Farms. Dan, take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Zimmerly, and I am the owner of Cedar Crate Farm. I am a produce farmer near Mankato, Minnesota, and we are in our 6th season this year. So our farm, we sell direct to consumer through our CSA program and the Mankato Farmers Market, and we also do a bit of wholesale, mostly to the St. Peter Food Co-op. We wrote a grant to fund a pack shed that we were constructing on this year. And the process for me took quite a while to kind of get through everything, and I'm going to basically be on repeat for a lot of what Deanne said. And we started basically with soliciting bids for what it was actually going to cost to build this thing the way we wanted, so that we had a good foundation for knowing how much our project was going to cost, how much money we were requesting. And we got 3 different bids so that we knew that we weren't getting, that we were getting a good deal, or that at least we weren't getting screwed over. So luckily all of our bids were pretty well in line with each other. And so we got to choose the vendor that we wanted to build our pack shed. You should start early when you're soliciting these bids, because even that, the whole thing takes a long time. It takes longer than you think it does, especially for a project as big as ours. Our shed was around $100,000 to build. And so it takes a long time to kind of come up with all the parts. So that was the first thing I did. And I started that about this time of the year last year. I got 3 different bids from 3 different contractors to see what this would cost. Simultaneous with that, I have worked on our business plan I used Ag Plan, and that's a thing that the University of Minnesota Extension has that helps you break apart your business plan into the kind of the individual components so that you can think about it in different ways. If you open up a blank Word document to start creating a business plan, especially if you've never done it before, it's going to be very challenging to do. And so Ag Plan kind of divided it out into different different like pieces of our business plan that really helped us just make a coherent business plan that made sense. And I spent, it was multiple weeks working on this business plan, and I would just take one section and work on it, and then that was enough for that day. And take another section and work on it the next day, and so on until the whole thing was done. One thing to note about Ag Plan is there's sections or pieces of this sort of template that they have that may not make sense for your business. And when we came into those scenarios, we just skipped that. So I would say the business plan is super important. And then finally, the application itself. I used the website to fill out the application. I saved religiously and copied and pasted my answers back and forth from Word into the application, not only to check spelling and grammar, but also just to make sure that I had my words saved in case, technology fails us, which it sometimes does. Part of the business plan and part of the application process was also soliciting those letters of support and identifying our funding resources. And I also was taking care of that stuff about this time last year. And so I talked to a bank who wrote a letter saying that they would provide the construction loan necessary to fund our project. And so I had them write a letter that I could attach to my application that said that they would fund my project. I also had money set aside of my own personal money that went towards this project and identified that. And then finally, we mentioned other grants that we were applying for, and I don't know if this is a good thing to do or not, but I just wanted to be basically completely transparent about what we were doing and how we were trying to fund our project. I knew that we could fund our project with, how do I say this? The project, it was necessary to have the grants to make the project work well, but I knew I didn't need to get all of the grants in order to move forward with the project. And I indicated that in my financials. Finally, the last piece of sort of the application thing that I did was just my financial plan. And we use holistic financial planning. And the beauty of that is it gives you all of your finances, including your personal finances. And if you have a partner or that kind of thing, their finances are included in there. So the person can see, yep, this person actually can afford to do this. This project will be successful if we fund it. I found it very difficult to both demonstrate a need for a grant, but also demonstrate that the project would be successful. It kind of felt like, I don't know, it kind of felt like if you could prove that your project was going to be successful financially, that maybe you didn't need the grant. So like treading that line was difficult for me. And I guess basically I reasoned it out that it would sort of speed up things for us. We wouldn't be, and it would make our farm more financially sustainable, basically, so that if we went ahead with this pack shed, that we would, if we received the grant, that it would basically give us more financial stability to sort of guarantee that we would be creating and producing more Minnesota agricultural products. Other things that I did were I got letters of support from the produce manager at the St. Peter Food Co-op, and then a restaurant in Mankato that we do business with as well. They highlighted just how we could grow more produce if this pack shed were to be funded. I also talked about how this pack shed would improve food safety on our farm, and made sure to highlight that as well in our application. So in total, I think my application was, I mean, it was huge. It was like 84 pages. So it was like way too long, but the pieces that you could skip out pretty easily were like the financial management stuff. That itself was like 30 pages, but it was very detailed, and you could just look at one page of it and see sort of the overview, which was nice. And then our business plan, it was kind of the same thing that was separated out into segments. So if you wanted to see what our marketing focus was, you could go there and see that too. So I can't stress enough how important it is to have a business plan, and it's pretty overwhelming. So I mean, I was super overwhelmed when I started thinking about writing a business plan, but using AgPlan really helped make it easier for me. So other things, I guess, are sort of the actual like nuts and bolts of after, if you're a successful recipient, you know, keep track of your invoices. Make sure you have a good banker that you're doing business with if you're financing your project through a bank. That way you can get basically the documentation needed to prove that your bills for your project are paid, because the Department of Agriculture wants that documentation. I found it very easy to work with the Department of Ag. It was basically as simple as emailing over those proof, like the invoice and then proof of payment. And then, you know, like a week later, a reimbursement came in the mail. So it was pretty seamless. Everyone there was really friendly. So I wouldn't be too intimidated by that. And then the last thing is I had my wife review my business plan. I reached out to an entity in Mankato. It might have been through MSU. I can't remember if it was a small business development center or something through the college, but they didn't provide support for grant writing. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, but my wife reviewed the application to correct anything, and we were successful and received our grant. So, and I am conducting this webinar from inside our pack shed that was built this year. So it's pretty exciting.
Woohoo! Thank
Yeah.
you, Dan. I'm
Yep.
going to turn it over to Jane Jewett with Minnesota Institute for Sustainable Agriculture to field questions. Jane, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hello, everybody. So I did copy the questions out of the chat, and if people want to put more questions in the chat or Q&A as we go along, that's fine. I'll keep an eye on that. But I'm going to do the questions in a little different order than they came in, just to try to make this a little more coherent. So one of the questions was whether the application materials for the AGRI grant are available in other languages, such as Spanish or Hmong, and if not, is translation available through MDA, or is there another way to get access to those if English is not your first language?
Yeah, so we do suggest you should reach out to me if you do your application in a form other than how it's presented on the website. I guess I don't know for sure if the applications are already translated or if we will get them translated for you. Anne, do you have any experience with this?
No, I don't. when I managed the value-added grant, we did not have translation services. I know we have some of our grant programs do have applications in a different language. So it's a Spanish application or a Hmong application. So I don't know about the value-added grant.
Yeah, I just suggest reaching out to me if you do need your application in a different form, and I will work to figure that out. But I can't say for sure right now what resources are available.
Okay, thank you. For both Dan and Deanne, it sounded like your application for the value-added grant funds, the work on the application was kind of interwoven with work on your business plan, and so maybe it's not so easy to separate out one from the other, but what's an estimate of the time that it takes to prepare the application and the length of that?
That really depends on how much you've already done. So if you have all the information, it might take a couple days to write it if you already have a business plan and you have all the numbers and all that, and you don't have to wait on that stuff coming in. So to actually just physically write it would take a day or two. And it also depends on how fast you write too. But for us, it took a couple weeks total to go back and forth between all of us partners with the editing and getting other people to review it for us. So it took a couple weeks for us. I don't know about you, Dan.
If you have all of the information you need, like you said, like you need your bids because you need to know how much it costs to do your project and those kinds of things. Assuming you have all of that done, I think it maybe took me a week, but I didn't have to bounce everything off of multiple people. I mean, this was me applying, and when it was all done, I had my wife review it to make sure that it made sense and I didn't have spelling or grammar errors and all that stuff. So I would say like a week, probably 40 hours, something like that. So.
Okay. So pretty significant time commitment just to do the application. So folks should look at the deadline for it and plan accordingly to have the time to do the application. Okay, here are a couple of specific questions about what would qualify. First one, we are developing a delivery van to deliver donated CSA veggies from southern Minnesota farms. Would this fall under the AGRI Value Added Grant or the Good Food Access Fund or perhaps another grant? Any perspective on that?
My instinct says that it could be eligible for both value added and good food. I don't believe you could apply for both, and I'm not entirely sure which would be a better chance of success, which program would be a better chance of success. So I would recommend that you should personally email me, and I can reach out to my colleague that does the Good Food program, and I can speak with her and give you some more insight into which program would be a better fit for you. Unless Anne has more to add, that's all I have.
All I have to add is for the value added grant, you would need to address how your project is going to increase production or the sales of Minnesota agricultural products.
Yeah, so if the veggies are being donated, that's not increasing sales for farmers. So that might not qualify for value added then. Is that what you're thinking, Anne?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
All right, here's another question about co-packers and working with co-packers. So this person is looking to potentially purchase equipment with a co-packer that will help us package products for a large national retailer. And they're wondering if they apply for the grant, can the co-packer also apply for a grant for the same equipment? So they would both be applying on the same equipment, or if not, then which one of us should apply?
I don't believe you could both apply for the same project. I'm not sure which person would be the better applicant. Anne, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think for one project, you can only receive funding from one grant. So if one applies for one, well, if you're applying for this one grant with the value added grant, so I would choose which would be the one applicant for the one project.
But co-packers would be an allowed applicant. It wouldn't have to be the farmer or the producer themselves that applied.
That's correct. Let's see. Eligible applicants, individual agricultural cooperatives, unit of government businesses. So a business is an eligible applicant.
Okay.
A business is eligible. To rephrase it so it doesn't sound like it's not.
Okay, thank you. Those were all the questions in the Q&A and chat. I have a couple other questions that I noted down while the presentations were going on, so I can ask those, but if people listening have other follow-up questions, if you'd put those in the Q&A or chat right now, please go ahead and do that. So one of the questions which Dan and Deanne both provided a little perspective on, but I'm wondering if there are other examples as well. How do people who are applying for value-added grants do their financing? Because the way it's set up, you have to pay 100% of the costs up front and then get the reimbursement from the value-added grant if you're approved. So I guess just, what are some examples of ways that people maneuver that to be able to pay all their costs up front and then get reimbursement?
I can tell you because we're in the middle of that right now. We are working on a SBA 504 loan, and the interest rates are crazy low right now. We also had the EDA, the Economic Development Authority in Cannon Falls, was going to help us out, and then the Southern Minnesota Initiative Fund, Smith, was originally going to help us out with our loan too. So we were able to, so we had 3 different types of loans working at once for that grant application.
And how do all those timelines work, Deanne? Because you've kind of got interlocking timelines here of when the grant has to be applied for, when you can start purchasing things, when it has to be paid for.
We had letters from all of them stating that they were most likely going to provide us that funding. So letters of intent from our lenders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a similar scenario. I can talk about one different thing. I mean, we had a loan through just our local bank we do business with, that said they would fund our project. But also, I was simultaneously working with FSA office. They have a farm storage facility loan program with really awesome interest rates that we qualified for. That applying for that was a whole different ball game, but we did actually get approved for that too. So that was noted in our application. So we had sort of 2 simultaneous, I guess, letters of intent, if you will, from both the bank that we do business with, but also then this farm storage facility loan program, which we were also successful in receiving. So that's how we funded ours. But otherwise, I mean, if you had the money up front, you could do it that way too, depending on the size of your project. Obviously, my project was, I wish I had that much money just hanging out, but I don't, so.
Yeah.
All righty. Does that wrap up the Q&A?
I did not see any more come in, so I think that's where we're at.
Okay, just a couple of
I have one thing to add with the the last question, that you can request reimbursement several times during the length of the project. So after certain amount of purchases were made and expenditures made, you can send in the invoices and proof of payment to get reimbursed 25% of what you paid on the project to that date. So that can help with cash.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Before we wrap up, there are a few announcements. The first is that this coming Wednesday, same time, noon to 1:15, will be an informational webinar on how to apply for Farmer Rancher grants. The link is right here, and we'll put it in the chat box. Jane, did you have anything you want to say about that one?
Sure, just briefly, this is going to cover the Farmer Rancher grants through North Central Region Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program and the partnership grants through NCR SARE, which are very similar to Farmer Rancher, except with the partnership grants, a farm educator, farm advisor type person takes the lead on the application and manages the project rather than a farmer managing the project, but both of those are for on-farm research and demonstration projects. And then we will also be covering the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's Sustainable Ag Demonstration Grant program. And all three of those grants are fairly similar in that they are for on-farm research and demonstration projects that are intended to be educational. So none of them cover purchase of capital equipment or facilities like the value added or the Good Food Access Fund do. These are different and they're for education. And the lead presenter on those will be Annie Claude, who's with U of M Extension. She's a fruit production specialist and has advised a number of farmers on those types of applications in the past. So she'll be our presenter, and we will also be getting it translated into Spanish. So there will be a Spanish version recorded and available a week or two after the English version of the webinar takes place.
Thank you, Jane. Also just want to make sure that folks know about where to go to find out more about the Farmer Rancher, the partnership, and the Sustainable Ag Demonstration Grant. And with that, I think our webinar is wrapping up. I would like to thank all of the presenters. In particular, I want to thank Jordan, since she is a newcomer to her role at Minnesota Department of Agriculture. I also really want to extend my thanks to Deanne and to Dan for sharing your experiences as well. Thanks, Jane, for fielding the questions and also for helping me out just with some of the logistics, and Anne and Jason for your backup. This will be recorded, and we will also, I honestly don't know, given the tight time frames, whether we will translate this, in that I believe the translation would be available too close to the deadline. However, we may want to translate as a means to encourage people to develop projects for next year. So it is uncertain at this point whether translation will be done. Anything else in making final comments? I see there's a couple of questions in the chat. Jordan is inviting folks to contact her with questions, and I know that both Dan and Deanne have said they would certainly help chat with people who have projects. Anything else? If not, I really appreciate everybody participating. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.